Hello and welcome to our spin-off podcast series, Perspi-café-tea. In this series, we distill the insights from our popular and successful Perspi-café-tea series, Learning from Leaders, into bite-sized chunks, no more than 15 minutes of insight-packed discussion. A perfect listen while you're enjoying a well-earned cup of tea or coffee, or beverage of your choice. We hope you enjoy the series and you can leave any feedback on the stream where you get your podcasts. Thank you very much. In this episode, we talk with Paul Healing about the DNA of a lean leader.
Morning, Paul. Glad you could join us today. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure, David. Really honoured to be asked to do it, actually.
Yeah, it's going to be a great conversation, Paul. Our theme today is decoding the DNA of a lean leader. And it'd be helpful, I think, to kick off with what that really means to you.
I suppose there's a lot of literature available out there in the lean space at the moment related to what makes lean successful and why transformation fails in businesses, and it always comes back to behavior. In my past, I learned most of my lean through classical Japanese coaching, particularly at Unilever before my time working with the Toyota guys. And I didn't know it at the time, but my Japanese coach, Arai-san, used to lead me on a cycle of activities that I didn't recognize until I saw the pattern form. I would attempt to take him to the boardroom to present graphs to him, and he would say no and lead me out to the shop floor. If I didn't follow, he'd go anyway. So he was clearly biased towards going into where the value was added. While we were there, I was pointing out large-scale, high budget, high technology changes, and he would look for small, incremental, really cheap things to do. And it wasn't until later I read some, research on successful transformation, and particularly lean transformation, that I recognized that he had a pattern in his behavior that was practiced, that he was practicing with me. And I had two questions about that. The first was, why didn't you just tell me up front what you were doing so I understood what I was trying to learn? Because I felt it might have been faster, because I wanted a quick fix. And it wasn't until I, 10 years later, began to understand the rituals and routines that he was taking me through, that I learned a big secret about the amount of time and investment he made in his coaching of me to lead me through these behaviors. As I say, I left Unilever and was very grateful for the training that I'd had after 10 years. And it wasn't until I joined a study group with Toyota that these things became transparent to me. And they were really simple. There were 4 key rules that most lean leaders learn through experience. And that is there is no substitution for direct observation. Go to the real place to see the real product. All change should be structured as small experiments. There should be a scientific thinking methodology, even if it's a tiny Kaizen, right the way through to major strategy change. Number 3 was leaders should experiment often with their workers, because you can only learn and generate wisdom through constant experimentation and predominantly failure, which is an anathema to people at Unilever, where every packet of soap powder was a profit. And finally, one of the most difficult things I ever learned was at number 4 on this sort of list of the DNA elements of a leader was coach, don't fix. And of course, I, as a young 26-year-old, one of the youngest group leaders within Unilever, thought that it was my job to fix things, and they'd chosen me to be the leader because I knew how to fix everything. And didn't realize for about the first 3 years of my management style that my real job was to help other people fix their problems through changing their thinking by asking good questions, not giving good solutions. So that's in a nutshell. I learned it took me 15 years to learn the process. That sounds amazing because it's only 4 simple things, and I still struggle to practice them on a daily basis today, rigorously, because there are so many distractions and so many things that can force you away from this. And under post-COVID restrictions, social distancing, remote working, I understand from a personal basis, it was easy to get distracted and make excuses before lockdown and remote distancing work took place to not do those habits. And if we don't think clearly about this moving forward, we could create the perfect excuses for leaders of the future not to practice those habits because they can stay at a distance and not want to or understand why these habits are really important.
I think there's a few interesting things in there, Paul. I'm sort of struck by this quick fix versus slower long-term thinking that you described. And with your sensei, what's going on stage, front of house, and what's going on behind the scenes. And it'd be really, really easy for leaders in lots of organizations to look for the quick fix and what's happening front of stage and not consider what's going on in the background. So I'm sort of interested in how important that was for you in your leadership journey.
Well, do you know, I'm always struck by the difference in approach from at the time, I'm talking about the 1980s, 1990s, but I still think this exists today. The Western approach to deployment of continuous improvement, whether that be TPM, lean, or any other operational excellence system, is identify a gap to a target condition, close it as quick as possible, and metrics drive behavior. So as a Unilever sort of apprentice leader, our key metric that cascaded right the way through the business amongst the balanced scorecard was cost. Safety came first, quality was second, delivery was third because it was pointless to deliver anything of substandard quality. And if we did all that right, cost would come, but must we engage our people, that conventional SQ DCP approach. What I noticed every time I worked with my sensei was he never talked about cost, he talked about waste. And what I realized, again, after too many years, is that the attitude of thinking about waste leads to different kinds of solutions than when we think about cost. If we think about cost reduction, it's generally short term, it is focused, and it is immediately measurable. So it's nice to have, but it generally reduces the capacity of a business because we limit the amount of things we can use, the materials we use, etc. If we think about waste, we're actually not devaluing or impacting the quality of the service or the product that we deliver. We're looking at everything beyond that creates quality and value in a product and a service, and where that thing isn't working in terms of changing the fit, form, or function of the quality of service or product that we're providing. So I think when we think in terms of waste, we think long-term and sustainable change. When we think in terms of cost, we think short-term and change that could adversely impact the business. And there's many examples of this. I remember working for Airbus, and a major Kaizen came in about changing the rivets that were used in the wing from a UK supplier of a certain grade of alloy to a Chinese supplier. And it was lauded as, I think this is way back in 1995, as the biggest cost-saving Kaizen globally that Airbus had put in, and it came from a low-level operator who operated a rivet gun. So it was a well-celebrated event. And a year later, the fleet was grounded when all of these rivets, when they went through extreme temperature ranges and they were a substandard alloy, popped out of the wing skins and grounded the fleet. So we have to be careful and understand the difference between waste and cost. There is also a psychology that takes place when we switch from cost to waste. Our natural evolutionary state as a human being is to think quickly based on prior learning, so we can make quick decisions. It helps us in our managing risk, fight or flight type driven autonomic responses. And it's really difficult to slow your brain down and say, stop. I need to think through a method before I assess the viability of this change and this potential solution. And I think whether this is the 4 steps of leadership behavior that we've discussed, the behavioral DNA, or the scientific thinking experiment, what both systems are doing is saying, stop, think, reflect, act, check the results, and start the cycle again. So I think you've probably picked out the key points in this, Keith, is understanding these frameworks. What it does, it provides a throttle and a brake. So we can apply that to our not only our physical behavior, what we say and what we do, but also how we think. Let's think slow when important change is taking place, and all change, when structured as a small experiment, is important.
Thanks, Paul. I really get that, because obviously from my time at Toyota as well, we were very much coached and not told, and it was very frustrating at the time, and I'm sure you felt the same. Coming back to modern day, where we are now, what do you think are the real drivers for leaders to actually fix problems rather than coach? Because the business itself, as you've already said, desires an instant reaction, an instant cost saving, and not focused on waste. So what do you think are the real drivers to make leaders fix problems rather than coaching people?
Well, we there were always problems, Dave, as you'll probably know. You and I came through the shop floor and developed through management and into leadership, and it was so easy not to practice these behaviors, to stay in your office, to read reports, to want to discuss problems that happened at 2 o'clock in the morning on the night shift at a board meeting at the end of the week, and think we could solve a problem because we had all the brain power in the room. So before COVID, this was difficult anyway. If you think of those, keep those 4 things in mind. You must go to the shop floor and see. You must go look, see. There's no substitution. We must structure all change as a small experiment. Leaders should experiment often with the team members, and we must remember to coach, don't fix. You've just asked me the question at the end of that: how do we make sure that we do coach, don't fix? Well, it's easy. Practice the first 3 things first. And the difficulty post-COVID could be the ability to go look, see, and be in the real place with the real process. We used to call this Genshi Genbutsu. Real place, real thing. So go to where the problem is happening. And I didn't realize there were more reals than that. There was real thing, real place. But to do it, you had to go in real time, and you met real people, and you looked at the real process. So you had an immersive experience by being amongst it, and you would spot things as you looked around that were impacting the problem situation, but weren't directly within the focus point of where the person was pointing to on the machine or on the computer screen, etc. So that environmental experience was always difficult, because it was easier to have a coffee and talk to the quality manager and ask him what he thought the problem was than go and speak to the operator or the procurement person that was suffering it. So that is problematic, making the time rigorously to go to the real place. When you get there, the next big problem is, I'm under pressure. We need to maintain performance. I know how to fix this. Just do this. Telling people what to do just creates the behavior in people to wait to be told what to do. We condition people in to wait to be told what to do. Risk aversion. And of course, every time somebody does something that I told them to do and it didn't work, it was my fault. There was no drive to make my solutions work. In fact, I'm sure in many cases people had viable solutions that I suggested that didn't work because of the way I suggested it. Now, if we just take those 2 steps, go to the real place and structure change as small experiments, we may think there are barriers post-COVID to doing this just because of distancing, travel, etc. But look at the technology that's available to us today that wasn't available to me and you in the 1980s and 90s. If we think about, in those days, the leading edge of technology was I'd take my computer with a camera on or a webcam. I'd go to the place where the problem was happening, and maybe we'd have a pack of 10 headsets that were available in the other plant or the other office, and everyone could use a shared set of headsets, and we'd listen in. But you couldn't speak back. You could only listen to what was being said. Today we have, 360 capability for cameras to be taken by a safely attired person who knows the problem situation, to take a team on a walkthrough through a production facility, through an office area, through a research lab, through a hotel lobby if it's a service industry, a hospital, for example. And as we walk through, we now have these Jabra headsets and mouthpieces that multiple groups can join a live tour that will take me to the real place where the problem's happening, to see the real thing that it's happening to, and to interact with and talk to the real people. And in these today, I can also do that in a 360 head turning way to have a look at the surrounding environment that this work takes place in. So, there is no substitution for direct observation. Used to be the mantra of Toyota. There is no excuse for direct observation today, post-COVID. Get your technology working. Make sure you locate the points of calls for a problem in your business, whether that problem's with a knowledge process, a transactional process, or a production process, and go and see the real place, the real activity, and talk to the real people. No excuse for that today.
Thanks very much, Paul. Much appreciated.